Yo, what's up, guys? It's Bobby Peacock back here again. Guys, I really hope that you've enjoyed the Spiritual Direction series. It's been absolutely amazing to do this series, to watch the series, and to hear about the series. And right now, we are on episode 3, and this is where my man, Zach, from Collision staff, sits down with Clint Eastwood. No, I'm just playing. He sits down with Clint Shamblin. Now, Clint Shamblin is a pastor at a Rise Church here in Sioux Falls, South Dakota. So in this episode, they sit down and talk about how to defend your beliefs. Now, Clint, he used to be a pastor in Oregon, and he had to deal with a lot of resistance dealing with the Christianity belief system. So he has a lot to say. So let's jump into it.
Well, hello, everyone. I'm Zach from Collision. We're back again today with Clint. Clint here is a pastor at a Rise Church in Sioux Falls. And today, we're going to talk about how to defend my beliefs. So, Clint, you want to just introduce yourself to everybody?
Yeah, absolutely. What do you want to know? I'm Clint, pastor.
Yeah.
We're next door.
Next door. Next door to Collision. It's kind of fun.
Right here.
It's an easy little walk.
It is.
Yeah. How about telling everybody where you're from originally?
So I'm a West Coaster, California, grew up, and then Portland, Oregon, and now out here.
Yeah. What brought you? What was the process of moving from the West Coast, like Portland, to Sioux Falls, South Dakota?
I'm actually part of it is this topic. We wanted to get back into a tradition that we have known and loved, Reformed tradition. So our church is Reformed, and Sioux Falls is a growing, up-and-coming city within America that is changing in demographics a little
Fastly,
bit.
yes.
And we're excited for that. And so that was kind of a challenge as well as excitement. And we planted a church out in Portland, and so we're very, very much involved in defending faith or sharing faith, expressing faith.
Yeah.
So
that's awesome.
So it brought us here.
Yeah. So just so you guys know, like we said, today's the topic of how to defend my beliefs. So when we say defending my beliefs with somebody, it's really talking about when people come to you with questions about why you believe what you believe. This is what we talk about. This is when we say defend, it's not always necessarily some kind of debate like you're trying to prove your point or make sure that you're right and they're wrong. It's really just like Scripture says, to have the hope within you when somebody asks, what's the source of your hope? It's really just that, like, sharing your faith as much as defending it. So, Clint, share us the best moment or, like, one of the most memorable moments of sharing your faith.
Yeah, absolutely. So Portland, Oregon, a little different than most other cities in America, or most other cities in general. And we got lots of questions of what is a Christian. I would introduce myself to people about pastor, and they would come up. They would call me father or padre or priest, and it got really weird very quickly. And so we had a neighbor. They had a block party every single year right across the street from us. Had a barbecue. I met him and his wife for the first time, and when they said, "Hey, what do you do?" What I was able to say to them is, "I like talking about this Jesus guy." Now, it was memorable because these two people would later come on to be of faith, attend our church. He actually wound up being an elder in our church. After 3 years, we trained him up to do so. And that first instance of saying to them, hey, I really like talking about this Jesus guy, might be a little off-putting if you come from high church. That sounds a little informal of God, the creator of the cosmos, which it is. But it was true of who I am. I like talking about this Jesus guy. And it put them at ease enough to continue conversation. And inevitably, whenever I said that to two people, they would say, "What do you mean?" And I said, "I'm glad you asked." And then I would go on to explain that. So that was very, very crucial for me. And one of the aspects, I think, just up front about sharing faith, of why it was so impactful, was the tone. Proverbs tells us that our tone is incredible, right? Our words can be choice silver, as Proverbs says, and you could disarm somebody who's angry. And so by saying to them, hey, I like talking about this Jesus guy, it was choice silver to a person who might not believe. And they wanted more of it. When they said, well, tell me more, that was the key part.
That's good.
Yeah.
So you said that these specific people that you shared faith with ended up eventually, long down the road, becoming an elder. So can you give us a timeline? Like, what does that look like from the time that you had that conversation of, I like talking about this Jesus guy, to an elder in the church? Like, what was the timeline for that?
It took 4 years for that
4
whole
years.
timeline to play
Okay.
out. So from instance one of meeting them, I like talking about this Jesus guy, and then continuing, we had a dinner that we did every Friday night in our back garage. We had a little garage. We did a potluck.
Oh, fun.
Where we invited the whole neighborhood. They would come out. We would feed them. It was chilly night. And this couple came over, got to know us bit by bit, started playing cornhole out on the streets or hanging out. And then one night, 2 years in to all of this friendship, he asked me to go out with him to a local establishment. I went with him, and he said, hey, I like you. I like hanging out with you. Why is that? And I stopped him. I said, you don't like hanging out with me. Whatever you like of me, you like of this Jesus guy. This guy I've been telling you about, because I'm a messed up idiot. Whatever's good is Jesus. And he was able to say, tell me more about that. And then I said, well, I was able to express the gospel plainly to him, which is I'm far more jacked up than I ever thought possible, but I'm far more redeemed than I could have ever hoped. That's the simplified gospel.
Really good, yeah.
So once I was able to express that to him, he said, great, is your church somewhere where my wife and I could come? And what he meant to say is your church a place where I could be skeptical of faith and still be accepted?
Be welcomed, yep.
And I said, absolutely, that's the gospel. The gospel is I'm far more jacked up than I ever thought, and yet I'm far more redeemed than I could have ever hoped for.
Yep.
So he started coming to church. A year after that, he was baptized, him and his wife.
Wow.
And then a year after that, I asked him to go through the process of becoming an elder because he exemplified all the characteristics that Scripture entailed, and he accepted, and we trained him to do so.
That's amazing. So is him and his wife then?
Yeah, him and his wife,
amazing.
and now they're 2 kids, and
Wow.
they're being trained up in the faith.
That is so cool.
Yeah.
So you made a good point. We talked about in Proverbs, the power of life and death is in the tongue. We can disarm somebody with a calm word that's angry. So the second question is like, if I'm trying to share my faith with somebody, specifically if I'm a high school student or student, and like I can relate to this, where some people just they walk around and it's kind of like a goody two shoes thing, and it's like I'm a little better than other people. Like, well, I'm not that bad. Like, I wasn't that bad of a kid. Blah 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 blah. How do I come across humble when I share my faith? When we have a conversation, how do I stay in that area of humbling ourselves and making sure we're not coming across as like kind of jerky, I guess?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the first thing is don't try to be humble. You'll fail every time. Stop trying to be humble.
Yeah.
It's every time you open your mouth, you kind of express who you are. So stop trying to be humble. Instead, be humble. Scripture says, be humble, or he says, be holy as I am holy. So the only way to do it is replication, right? My children have my eye color and my hair color. And the only reason they have my hair color and eye color is because I gave that to them. I replicated DNA.
Yeah.
When we're talking about faith, you can't give to somebody else what you don't have already.
Yep.
So if you're not humble, actually, I would encourage you, stop talking about faith. Don't do it. It's going to wind up being bad for everybody. Every time I preach on Sunday, there's this, Christ gives this analogy in Matthew 18, or in the Gospels. Not Matthew 18, I think it's Luke, where he says, if any one of you lead these little ones astray, it's better that you jump off a cliff than face me.
Yeah.
And what he means is, if you get this wrong, it's not going to be good when I show up.
Yeah.
Don't lead these little ones astray. You bet. Now that's terrifying to me. Every time I preach, I think about that.
Yeah.
It's terrifying.
I've heard other pastors talk about that too, and like I've thought about that as like, it'd be worse for me to say the wrong thing than to say nothing at all in some cases. Like that's what I'm afraid of. Like I'm afraid of maybe I just keep my mouth shut. I don't know. You know.
So if we fear coming across that way, what we should do is we should first reflect on the awesome power of Christ.
Yeah.
Right. As C.S. Lewis puts it, you read the Narnia series?
Oh yeah.
Okay, good. Yeah,
Yep.
great. I'm so glad to hear that. In one of the parts of Narnia, Lucy's looking out, and Aslan, the lion who is supposed to represent Christ, roars, and it's a terrible roar. And she says, "Oh my goodness, that's I thought Aslan was kind and gentle." And one of the other characters looks at her and says, "He's after all a lion." And he says in it, "He's not safe, but he's
But
good."
he's good. Yep.
And it's such a powerful statement to say, as Christians, we have a God who we can't make a pet lion. He's a lion.
Yeah.
He's not safe, but he's good. So we need to understand. So first thing is recognizing actually the awesome power that God has. It's actually what Proverbs again will say, what Scriptures will say. The beginning of all understanding is fear. So fearing God to say, my goodness, when I speak of Him, I'm actually an ambassador for him. He's given me the right to do so. Which is, by the way,
It's also absurd in a way. It's just
bananas
like crazy.
That's insane that he would have us speak on behalf of him,
Yeah.
and yet that's how he wants it to be. So we need to be humble. I can't just make myself humble. I have to become humble, and he's the only way to do it. So the only way that I can be humble is to see his awesome power, and the only way to do so is if I see just how much his cross cost himself to give to me.
Yeah.
So there's a parable of the unrepentant or unforgiving or ungrateful servant. He owes this incredible debt to the farmer, and the farmer comes and says, hey, you know what? Your debt's free and gone. But yet this guy's kind of like a middle management position. He's got other people that owe him money, so he goes and he beats them for the money that they owe him. He's been forgiven. He has no debt. But he gets greedy and he says, I'm going to go get money from other people. And he goes and gets money. Turns out that the owner of the land comes and says, what are you doing? I forgave you, and you're not forgiving others?
Yep.
And he actually imprisons that man.
Yeah.
So I think what we need to see and what we need to realize as Christians, when we're an ambassador, when we're going out, the only way to represent Christ well is to not think that we are right or are better. And the only way to do that is to see the cost of salvation. That's the only way. To fear God, to say, my goodness. It literally took the cosmos makers on the cross willingly bleeding out for me, and I did that to him. The more you believe that, and the more you get that, the more you rehearse that, the more you're going to be humble when you speak and not thinking, well, I'm so good, I deserve grace.
Yeah. Because it's pride. The reality is it's pride.
That's what it is.
Yeah.
That's exactly what it is. So do I want other people to come to faith? Absolutely. Why do I want them to come to faith? And this is the big piece. This is where it transitions. So fear of God.
Sure.
Why do I want to express faith? This is a question you need to ask yourself as you're preparing to share it. If your idea is to save other people, stop speaking about faith as well. What we should be doing is like a good restaurant or a movie. Your favorite movie, you just naturally speak and you naturally share it because you love it so much.
Yeah.
Because it's beautiful.
I don't have to look up information and be like, I got to make sure I know how to
And
make it sound like I like
do is
this
you're
movie.
Like, come watch this movie with me. I want you to come.
Yeah.
That's the idea of defending faith, of sharing faith, is I'm so jacked up about this movie. I'm so thrilled about this Christ. I want to share him with you so much. And can you just come and see? Can you come and witness him? That's the goal that we all want. So the goal in evangelism, of defending faith, of sharing all this, is actually worship of God.
Yep.
It actually is worship. I was on this mission trip to Japan with a whole bunch of students to Army base. We had prepared a whole entire series of evangelism, and something happened on the base. We were not told what happened on the base because it was secret, and no kids showed up. We're like, oh man, we can't do it anymore. We're about to close it down. And our leader said, what are you doing? I said, well, nobody came. He goes, preach. And I go, why? He goes, because it's not about just saving people. It's about worship of God. If people are saved, it's because of his hand. And we preached the whole thing we were prepared to with nobody in the audience. And it was thrilling because it was about worship of God, not worship of man. Wow. That's what I would encourage.
That's awesome.
Students to understand.
That's so good. I think you bring up a good point because, and I've been so guilty of this, when you talk about that parable of the unfaithful servant or the wicked servant, is we come to realize how awesome God is, and we come to realize the depth of Christ's sacrifice for us. And then we turn around and we're trying to make rules that everybody has to follow to be like a good Christian or something, right? Like we create religion, and we create this set of things. It's like, yeah, do this, that, and this, and that. And like rules are good. I mean, rules have a way of protecting us and also ways of fulfilling things that give us joy. But when it becomes about the rules, then it's just about the act of making sure I do these things so that I have some kind of sense of like, well, I'm just a really pious or holy person,
Absolutely.
right? And then when and I've seen that in my own life where that's ruined my witness because people look at it's like, I don't want what you have because you're just doing this to impress people or make people impressed of you. You know, when the Pharisees would pray and when they would tear their clothes, when they would fast, they would make themselves look disfigured on the street so everybody could see that they're so holy and that they're suffering.
Yeah.
And, you know, Jesus says, hey, if you're going to fast, like, take a shower, clean yourself up, and make it look like that nobody could tell that you're fasting, right? And it's like, so you're telling me that I need to live a holy life, but no one should be able to tell that I'm living a holy life in a way.
That's
it's like people just go, what is it about that person? And so that's interesting. I think it's important for you guys to understand that, and for me to understand that, is that the best thing that I could do is to live that quiet life of pursuing holiness. And when people confront me about what is it that you're doing, what is it that you have, that gives you, like, that's God, like, in his sovereignty making a way for you to have that conversation that will then potentially, like, he'll lead them into a relationship.
That's exactly right. We are told so often to ask God for provision of resources, and we typically think financial resources, right? As families, or I don't know if your family does this, or if your providers do this, where you say, we've got to ask God to provide for us. At the end of the day, why aren't we asking God for provision of relationship to bring us people that he has in mind that we can share faith to? It's the same exact thing. It's his provision of relationship, not just financial. We need to do that more and more.
So when we talk about leading people to faith, this is a good question too. Have you ever had an experience, or based on that experience, have you seen people like try to be forced into belief, or like if I just argue and if I solve all of their questions and points, like they'll just be kind of argued into faith? Like, so let's unpack that a little bit.
In the history of mankind, there has not been one person that's been argued into faith. In the history of mankind, it can't happen. It won't happen. It'll never happen. Because somebody has to come to faith. The scriptures indicate to us that God initiates and we receive. Right? I have to receive this faith from him. If I don't want it, I can't be forced into it. So I think one of the things that we need to understand as Christians, we should stop arguing. And we should stop talking down to people, and we should start out shouting them. It's never going to help anything. If you really want to attract people, I use the analogy of fires. If there's one fire somewhere else, and it's actually toxic fire, it's actually a gross fire. My goal is not to say this fire is gross, it's disgusting, it's horrid, and start like trying to splash it down. My job is to make a bigger fire over here that's warmer, more accommodating, greater, brighter, and for people to start being attracted to that. And then for me to say, this fire is pretty good, isn't it? Go, yes, it is. Why is it so different? I'll tell you why. No one's been argued in the faith ever, and we need to stop believing that. And I'll say it like this. If you're sitting there, you're like, no, I was arguing in the faith. You weren't, I can promise you. Because Scripture tells us you weren't. Scripture can tell us that you came to see things through sharpening of iron sharpens iron. That's true. But to receive salvation, you have to receive it. So I'll put it like this. When we're talking about heaven and hell, if I could describe heaven, and if I could try to encourage you to define heaven this way. Heaven is the things of God 24/7. So we typically think all the time, one of the things of defending faith that I came into is, well, why would a good God send people to hell? And I actually stop people and I go, well, I got to stop you. Why would a good God force people who don't want him to hang out with him all the time? That sounds unloving to me. You want to talk about an unloving God? It's kind of like every time I went over to your house as a friend, if you knew I hated basketball, and every single time you're like, hey, let's play basketball. I'm like, I've told you last time I hate playing basketball. You're like, no, I'm going to make you play basketball. I'm not going to be friends with you. I'm going to go find other people that like to play soccer or whatnot. Why is it that we want to look to God and say, God's so evil for not bringing everybody to heaven? Well, if you don't want him, why would forcing to hang out with him be 24/7 be a gracious thing?
That's so like profound. Even right now, like I'm hearing that, because the other half of that is I think students can really get on board with this. Is, have you ever had your parents like say something about like heaven and hell, and it's like, I'm almost scaring you into accepting Jesus, because like I'm not accepting Jesus because of how awesome he is or how awesome heaven could be, but like I just really don't want to go to hell. You know, it's like exactly right. It's like I want to please my parents because I don't want to get grounded. You don't do that. You know, it's like that's a fear-based relationship that will always have some kind of pain or trauma wrapped around it, and it'll always turn into this thing of, well, I have to do this just so that I don't get punished. It's like Scripture's pretty clear that God's not walking around with some wooden paddle just waiting for somebody to mess up.
No, as a matter of fact, Christ says, I came not to judge. I will come to judge later, but right now, that's not the time. I came to set the captives free. So another way of thinking of hell is just you 24/7. That's what hell is. Heaven is God 24/7, the things that he likes. So if you don't like him now, why would I ever force you to be with him forever? That sounds unloving. Hell is you 24/7 because you've said, I want me. Well, I don't know about you. If I hung out with 20 me's all day long, 24/7, it'd be an awful experience. It'd be the worst experience.
I can retweet that.
Okay, good.
Like 20 of me, not 20 of you.
Well, same thing. Yeah, no.
Both be bad.
Both be bad. That's hell. So really, when people say, I don't want God, I want me, God says, okay, have you forever. Oh my gosh, that's a horrible existence. Just you, endlessly. God endlessly is so magnificent. There's so many facets and so many complexities to him. I'll never get tired. There's not really complexities of me. I'm a pretty simple thing.
Mm-hmm.
I'll get bored of me after 2 days. You
Yep.
know? So that's something that I think students need to hear is as we share faith, it's for those who want God 24/7 to invite them to a greater, more attractive fire. And with that, again, the arguing thing, Charles Spurgeon, this really incredible pastor, had a famous quote, and he says, people ask him all the time, like, how do I defend the Bible? How do I defend my faith? And he says, defend? He's a lion. Let him out of the cage and he'll defend himself. And so I think for many of us, we want to coerce and argue. And at the end of the day, God can speak on his own.
Yeah,
Our job
that's
is to create a fire witness to attract him to it. But he's bigger and better than we could have ever imagined.
It's good.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's important. You know, one question that I had to really come to grips with is when it comes to evangelism or just sharing your faith and defending it with people, I've had to really be mindful of, am I even living the kind of life that people would want to take part in? You know, because it's like I can walk around defending my faith, sharing my faith with people, but then they look at my life just as in general, like a generalization of my daily activity, how my personality, how I act, and they go, that's a person who follows Jesus. I'm like, I can't really differentiate them from anybody else, you know? So it's like,
Exactly.
if I have nothing that would even entice them, you know, because like Jesus says, like, drink from the well. If you drink from this well, you'll never go thirsty. But if I'm following Jesus and I drink from the worldly well and I'm consistently going back, they're like, well, you're drinking from the same well I am, but yet you're saying that you're following this guy.
Yep.
And so I think that's important. And when we share our faith, when we live this out, I think it's a good question to always be mindful of is are we living in a way that actually reflects something that people would want?
Yes. In the command in the gospel to go make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, and teaching them all these commands. It's incredible. It actually gives us a game plan of how to do so.
Yep.
Right? It says go make disciples. Now, this go make disciples is not a force. It's actually causation. It's exactly what you just said. When people look at you and go, all right, you're weird. Why are you talking different than the world talks? Why
Yep.
are you distinguishable? Because
Yeah.
you're living a life you're doing. Okay, great. And then it says baptizing them in the name of the Trinity, essentially. That baptizing piece is a public worship, right?
Yep.
Is actually, if a person meets a Christian and you speak Christ, they can write you off as crazy. They'll be like, oh, that guy's just crazy, whatever. They meet your friend and there's now 2 or 3 and they go, okay, they're weird. Now all of a sudden they meet 4 or 5 people who are worshiping Christ and following him and they go, okay, something's up here. Then you get to 10, 11, 12 and they go, okay, either this is a cult or there's some validity to this.
Yeah.
Or there's some things I could listen
Yep.
to. Now all of a sudden when you have a whole church behind you and you have a whole community and you go, oh, something's real, something's tangible, something's true about this.
They can see it.
They can
feel
see
it.
It's public worship. And so
Yeah.
this is why it's so crucial as we're going out and as we're evangelizing, as we're sharing faith, what we need to do is we need to do it in community, publicly.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
We can't do it in secret. We need to do it with other people.
Yeah.
And that's why Christ sent them 2 by 2. And then the Trinity, which is deep theology, and then super deep theology, and then teaching them all my commands. It's a law.
Yeah.
It's actually that's the whole game plan. Publicly worship, teach them very hard, difficult things, and teach them law. And that's the fire that you create. That's the attractiveness that you create. The community piece that everybody's going. And here's what the law says, if I could quickly say. The law says there's a whole lot of commands that I can never keep. The law was not meant for me to go, all right, check,
No.
I'm doing it. The
So
law was
show
meant for
you.
me to go, I can't do it, I tap out. And go,
Yep.
So now you get a group of people worshiping a God who says, you're going to need to tap out, but yet I'm going to supply for you. Oh my gosh, that's gonna carry a witness.
Yeah, and that's cool because I think the last thing that we need to unpack a little bit with that, with the communal sense of doing life with people, and then people seeing that and go, "What's this all about?" Is how do I ask this in a way that the way you guys can understand is people would say like around the idea of belief, like isn't Christianity just belief and in emotional things, but at the same time, I think we can all agree that there is a sense of like reasoning and logic in it. But how would you explain it to somebody when they talk about like, well, I know I believe this, but is there like if I start to become logical about it, am I going to lose my faith, or if I start asking questions and reasoning, and am I going to fall away from faith?
Yeah. So I have 3 things I want to hit on. One, Every single person on planet Earth is a worshiper and
Mm-hmm.
believes in something. Okay, so that's the first thing. Second thing, faith is actually an incredibly, incredibly grounded thinking religion. It's very, very logical. It's not emotional in the sense that we call emotion.
Yeah.
The Psalms actually tell us, pray through your tears. It actually says you're going to have tears, but your tears aren't going to overcome you. Pray through them, think through them, talk through them. So actually, the Christian faith, when I get this line all the time when people are like, well, I just feel God so much, there's nothing that can change that. I go, oof. I mean, you haven't been kicked in the teeth by life yet. You haven't had a son be diagnosed with an illness. You haven't had a friend die.
Yeah.
Because actually what faith says is there are times where we have horrid examples or instances happen to us. We need to pray through that. So Christian faith is incredibly thinking. It's incredibly rooted in talking and rationality. And every single person is a worshiper. So if you think about this, I can ask you students, what's the one thing in life that if I took from you, you would want to crawl in a hole and never be seen again? Right?
Yeah.
So if I told you, what if I could promise you, let's say I'm a villain in some bad movie and I have endless amounts of money, and I want to make sure you never marry in your life, you never have children, you never get a job, you never please your parents. Ladies, what if I took a knife and put a scar from here to here across your face? Guys, what if I ridiculed you publicly that people would mock you endlessly? Would that make you want to go in a hole? That thing I just described, that answer you just gave, it's called an idol. That's what you worship. Every single person on planet Earth has hopes and dreams that they want to accomplish. That's a worshiper.
Yeah.
So every single person is a worshiper. You need to identify what those idols are in people, what the things that they worship are, and show how Christ answers what they're trying to do.
It's good.
So for us, I want people to know me intimately. And if nobody knows me intimately in a romantic sense, I'm undone. Oh gosh, Christ knows us more intimately than you could ever have imagined and accepts us more radically than you could have ever hoped. Oh my goodness. Now all of a sudden, I can go get married, but I don't need to.
Mm-hmm.
So the first thing we need to see is everybody is a worshiper. Next, Christian faith is incredibly thinking faith. And lastly, I'll use evolution as an example. In high school, I went through a time and season where evolution was like the boogeyman that we had to fight all the time. Here's my question. If evolution is real, does that actually take away from God? Again, I'm not saying, I'm not making a position. I'm just saying if it's real, does that change the Genesis account at all?
No, not really.
It doesn't. What's the
Really
Genesis
core.
account? There was a time that God put Adam and Eve in a garden and said, "You're my people, and go out from here."
Yeah.
Okay, so that was 10,000 years ago, 10 million years ago. It doesn't change anything.
Mm-hmm. It just says in the beginning. It doesn't say a date
It says
and time.
in the beginning.
Whenever it did begin, it began.
It began. And so another way of saying
Yeah.
that is this. If I were to ask you, people ask me all the time, hey, how did you and your wife meet? And I typically say, well, we met on this exact, I do it historically.
Yep.
But if I was to say, when does your story begin of you and your wife? Actually, it starts 200 years ago when my family immigrated to the States. And after they immigrated, they went out west. And after they went out west, my family was in Southern California. And they went to Northern California. And we went to a school and we went to a church. You see what I'm saying?
The rabbit trail.
The huge story. And all God is saying is, when did our story begin? Adam and Eve. Garden. So even if these things are out there, it doesn't change anything.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. So, Clint, that was just like a really beautiful example of understanding that when we follow Christ, when we're in this relationship with Jesus, there's belief, there's an emotional, there's a connection, because like if you had to tell me your relationship with your wife, there's probably an emotional side of that where you have feelings and stuff like that. But there's probably also, and I'm learning this too, even though I've only been married for like a year and 6-7 months, so like not that long, but there's also this thinking side of, hey, we have to do this, this, and this, and like logically the best decision for us to do is, so there's both, there's all of it. Do you have any closing thoughts with any of this for students that can just have some assurance or just encouragement of being confident in sharing their faith, or just being confident in living out their faith around people that maybe don't share the same belief as them?
That's very good. I think one of the things, and not to belabor the point, but West Coast is very post-Christian.
Yeah.
And sitting in that culture and not being undone by somebody, they don't have to agree with me for me to be full in life, because God's already looked at me and said, "I'll never leave you nor forsake you."
Yeah.
Right? He said to me, "The gates of hell can't overcome my church." So really, if people don't agree with me, what does that change about me? It shouldn't change anything.
Yeah.
If I have somebody who is endlessly loving me, serving me, and will never leave me, and I can't ever fail him, I can take on the world. Mm-hmm. Now I think our so maybe my final words is this: as you're thinking about sharing faith and you have nervousness over it, or you fear, or you have to argue, it actually is a way for God to say, for a moment, it's not about them; it's about you.
Yeah.
Why are you so anxious right now? Don't you hear that I love you endlessly, and you can't mess up my church. You can't mess up my church. I'm gonna prevail. I've already prevailed. On the cross, he said, "It is finished." And what glory that is for us to say, if it's finished, we're playing with house money. Like, we've already won. Mm-hmm. Let's go celebrate. This is the post-celebration dance.
Yeah.
It's the parade. Yep. Right? We don't got to go win the World Series. He's already won it.
Yeah, that's really good.
Let's go down Main Street and celebrate and dance and sing. How glorious. And ask other people, come join us. So that would be my last thing, because that's emotional. It's celebratory. It's also thinking, it's done. It's finished. It's not a maybe, possibly, could be. And now we get to keep on rolling down the parade till glory comes and kingdom comes on earth.
That's awesome. Yeah. Wow. That's so good. Well, guys, I hope you really enjoyed the interview with Clint. I also really hope, just right now, I hope that if you're watching this, you feel encouraged, not just to like go out into some crusade and start like defending your beliefs against a bunch of people, but I hope you're encouraged that you can live a life that follows Christ among friends or family or peers that don't believe the same as you, and you can genuinely live a life that reflects Jesus, and you don't have to worry about who you're going to talk to, because they'll come to you. Like, Jesus will lead them to you. And if they ask a question, answer the question. Don't be afraid to share. Also, don't feel like saving people is your weight to bear, because that's not. We don't save people. Jesus saves people. Yeah. We just profess and we testify to what we believe. That's what the disciples did. So we love you guys. Thank you so much. We'll see you next time.
Thank you guys so much for watching. And after every episode, we will be asking you 2 challenge questions. So for this episode, the 2 challenge questions are: 1, do you come across as humble when sharing or defending your faith? And 2, are you living a life that is set apart from the world? Guys, thanks so much for watching. Feel free to answer one or both of those questions in the comments below. And like always, feel free to like, comment, and subscribe, and we will see you guys in the next one.